So when you look at the final score on paper, this was a win for Real Madrid, but that score hides a much more worrying story. You see, this wasn't really a triumph, it was more like a narrow escape, and it raises some pretty serious questions about one of the world's biggest clubs. A miracle saved Real Madrid from another embarrassment. Just let that sink in for a moment. That's the main takeaway from the analysis of this game. Not some tactical masterclass, not a dominant performance. A miracle. That one sentence tells you pretty much everything you need to know about the 90 minutes that just happened. And that contradiction is exactly what we need to unpack here. This was for sure a deceptive triumph. The team walked away with 3 points, yeah, but the feeling was anything but victorious. It was a classic case of winning ugly, but maybe a little too ugly for comfort. I mean, think about the razor-thin line between two completely different stories. With just seconds left on the clock, this was shaping up to be a horrible, frustrating draw that would have been all over the headlines. But then, one deflected shot later, and bam! Suddenly, it spun as an epic triumph. The score changed, sure, but that deeply worrying performance? That didn't. And there it is, 2-1. That was the final score against Celta de Vigo. A win is a win, as they say, right? Well, this one felt less like a conquest and more like a great escape. So this feeling of just unease leads us right to the performance itself, which one analysis perfectly called the office of tedium. And that just captures the mood perfectly, doesn't it? This wasn't exciting, it wasn't dynamic, it was a grind. Just a weary, uninspired day at the office. Worrying. That's the single word used to describe the feeling before that last gasp goal. And it speaks volumes. It wasn't just a bad day. It was the kind of performance that makes you question the team's energy, its direction, everything. And the reasons for that worry? Oh, they're crystal clear. Madrid couldn't dominate a Celta team that, let's be honest, wasn't even at its best. They showed no passion, no urgency. In fact, Celta had some really clear chances to win it. If it weren't for some heroics from Courtois and a little help from the goalpost, this story would have been a disaster long before the final minute. This all brings us to the real core of the problem. The team was playing without weapons and with a ton of doubts. The issues weren't just about attitude. You could see very real tactical holes on the pitch. The team just looked lost, like they were missing their key difference makers. And on the field, the problems were everywhere. The stars just weren't firing. Vinicius Jr., who's usually this constant threat, was basically a non-factor. The defense was, as they say, leaking water all over again. You had young talent like Arda Güler getting subbed off and looking visibly frustrated. It all points to one thing. This team is really struggling to function without its true superstars, Mbappé and Bellingham. And here's a quick look at the lineups from the day. You can see the names we've been talking about. For Madrid, you've got Courtois in goal, that vulnerable defense, and the attacking trio that just could not seem to click. On paper, it's a team that should win, no doubt. But football isn't played on paper, is it? So if the team was playing this poorly, how on earth did they pull out a win? Well, that question leads us to the hero of the day. But I'm telling you, the hero of this story is not who you might think. The source puts it perfectly. Who rescued the ship? Because after a performance like that, with the team basically sinking, who was the savior? Now, on paper, these are your heroes, Aurélien Tchouaméni and Federico Valverde. Their names are on the score sheet, their goals got the 3 points. They rescued the ship, right? Wrong. According to this analysis, the real hero, the single biggest deciding factor in this entire match, was luck. Pure, simple, dumb luck. Okay, so picture this. It's added time, the game is hanging by a thread. Valverde lets one fly from distance. It's heading towards the goal, but then, wham! A massive, cruel deflection off a Celta defender. The keeper is sent completely the wrong way, totally helpless as the ball just flies into the net. It's improbable, it's messy, and for Real Madrid, it's unbelievably lucky. But you know how it is. For every story of incredible luck, there's always a flip side. For Madrid's so-called hero, there has to be a villain. And in this match, he was what the source calls an unjust villain. That unlucky Celta defender, his name was Marcos Alonso. He's the one whose body the ball cannoned off of to score that winning goal. And this is just heartbreaking. The fortuitous play wanted the defender's back to deflect the ball, turning him into an unjust villain. Imagine that. After playing a solid game, to have the entire match decided by a ball just happening to hit you and go in, that is the cruelest part of the sport. He was a villain by pure circumstance, not by any mistake. So, where do both of these teams go from here? We've got to look at what's next, because this one single result has some major implications for the brutal road that's ahead for both of them. For Real Madrid, this schedule is just brutal. They've got Manchester City in the Champions League twice, and a derby against Atletico Madrid. A performance like the one they just gave against Celta, that is simply not going to cut it against opponents of this caliber. The alarm bells are definitely ringing loud and clear. And Celta, meanwhile, they've got their own battles to fight. They have a two-legged Europa League tie against Lyon and some really tough domestic games. After a loss that heartbreaking, they are going to need to regroup and fast to avoid a downward spiral. Which brings us right back to where we started. What was this 2-1 victory really? Was it an epic, character-building triumph that was snatched from the jaws of a draw? Or was it a massive warning sign? A lucky result that's just papering over some deep, systemic problems right before the most difficult part of the season? Well, I guess only the next few weeks will tell.